and welcome to Liberty Online. My name is Kaylee and today we have got something completely different for you on Valentine's Day. Today we're continuing our Great Expectation series. Last week, Phil brought a message about expectation in relationships. He said great relationships are built on great expectations, and then went into more detail to say great relationships are built on both parties knowing the needs and desires of the other person and then striving to put them first. So, today I get to quiz our leaders about how they navigate expectations in their marriage of over 16 years, whilst leading our church for the last 12, and also during that time raising 4 children. We've never done this format before, so it should be a bit of fun, so let's get straight on with our first ever Liberty Online interview. So, good morning everyone at home. We've got Phil and Steph with us today, and we're going to be doing a good little interview all about their marriage. So, Phil, don't be too nervous, it'll be good. So, you've been married for over 16 years, is that correct?
That is.
Yeah.
That is.
16 and a half.
Yeah,
16 and a half.
Together 20 years.
Oh, so yes, that's impressive. It is very impressive. So I'm imagining that perhaps after these 20 years, but 16 years of being married, that you may have had to navigate your way through a few differences as you've kind of been going through. So when we're talking about your relationship for this first question, I just want you to think back to the early days before you'd clearly perfected everything. So in the early days of your relationship, did you discover that you had different expectations of each other, your relationship, and the life you wanted to build?
Go on, you can go first.
Well, we definitely were very different in lots of regards, especially early on. When we got together, how old were you? 17? I was 18, I think 19 maybe. Our expectations of each other are wildly different. But I think one of the big ones that stood out to me, which I think can be a big problem in lots of people's relationships, particularly marriages, was like our thoughts on money and how it should be spent. And so, like, Steph would rather put money into things that, for me, had no value at the time, like holidays and things like that, and want to go and spend money on things that didn't keep value, where I was more of a put all of our finance into a house as much as we can and do nothing fun, have nothing in the house because it would hold its value for
sit in the house.
Yeah, cold, no heating on, because I valued the future and planning ahead. So my expectation was that, where Steph was more, let's spend it on things that we drink and eat and things like, for instance, university and hot chocolates reminds me of some.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I got gifted quite a lot of money when I turned 18.
£1,000.
Well, that's just and I did just blow it away, really.
On hot chocolate?
On hot chocolate.
Yeah,
£1,000.
And maybe a few DVDs or videos at the time.
But in like 9 months, £1,000 on hot chocolate and DVDs, and a few train fares as well, back and forth to university.
Yeah, and maybe a few tops. But other than that, I mean, I wasn't very good with money. However, I am pretty good now. Well, like,
but that's pretty wildly different.
Yeah.
Initially, yeah,
very different. And I also think, like, for me, one of the differences is I thought that Phil would be good at DIY, and he wasn't. So that was a big shocker for me.
Yeah, it's a bit like first year of marriage, you expected me to be able to fix things that I broke in the house, and I didn't have the skill set nor the inclination.
But from that, I have actually learned that I actually am quite good at fixing and making things.
Definitely, if we buy any sort of flat pack furniture, Steph gets on and makes it. It's just easier. So,
and better.
That's true. One thing that I think, like probably the first year of marriage, and I remember us talking about it, was when. From the day we got married, Steph would do everything in the house. And I mean everything in the house.
Yeah.
She wouldn't let me do anything.
No.
Which I was brought up in a household where we had lots of chores, lots of jobs, and it was like it was expected that we, as a man, there's no difference. And for some reason, Steph brought into the relationship that she was going to look after me.
Yeah.
And like it was weird to start with, but then I milked it.
Obviously.
For as long as possible. But it's weird because it was an expectation that she thought I had of her. And yet I didn't have that of her. And so she slogged her guts out for like a year before talking to me about it.
Yeah, I thought to be a good wife, I had to do everything and look after Phil.
And iron my pants.
Yeah. No, well, yeah, I did iron his pants.
No
Who
way.
does that? Yeah, I ironed everything.
And I'd be like, why are you ironing pants?
I'm like, well, because it's nice. What a div. I don't know. Yeah. But I did. I had this, expectation that I had to be this super wife, and that's what Phil expected of me. And then I sat down and had a mental breakdown. I was like, I can't do any more hoovering.
And I was
It's
like,
going to kill me.
I don't even expect it. I don't even care. Which is probably not a bit of a slap in the face because she's trying to do something to please me that I wasn't really bothered about. So it was good that we, it only took us a year to
years. Yeah, that's
to get
quite a
that
while.
out of the closet of our mind.
Yeah. Hey.
Yeah, and I suppose even that about the way we deal with conflict was a different expectation from when we got together 20 years ago. Because we deal with conflict in a very different way, and so I think our expectations of conflict resolution within a relationship was very different. We approached it in a different way. I'm more of a let's talk about it now and sort it right now, where Steph was more like
I'll get to it later.
Talk about it later. We're in the middle of a fight. We'll leave. I remember actually one time I was in my mum's car.
This was very early on.
Yeah, this is first few months, because we used to fight like cat and dog for the first year and a bit of maybe even before we got married. We'd fight a lot. People would think, are they all right? But I remember having a disagreement about something, and she walked off from the bottom. I was like, where are you going? You don't leave an argument. I haven't won yet. So you can't leave a fight. And so I drove quite quickly to the speed limit, chasing after her and then shouting out the window, where are you going? And got angry. It's like, we're in the middle of a fight. We're fighting. And different expectations
Get in the car.
of how we should resolve. Go on, get in the car. Yeah, I think that was, definitely one.
Yeah, and I think another different expectation. Sorry, we've got quite a lot.
You have
we?
got a lot. I had a lot of expectations.
A long time to work through.
Would probably be regarding the children and the number of children, because obviously when we first got married, I was very clear with Phil that I wasn't going to be ever pregnant. That was never for me, and definitely not going to give birth. That was just awful. That wasn't going to happen. I didn't want my body to change and things like that. And over the years, we've obviously had children, many of them. So that's changed a lot. That difference.
Steph wanted none. I wanted 4, and so we compromised and had 2 each.
Yeah.
So
You mean you won?
I won.
So that's quite a few expectations that you had.
We've probably got more, but maybe for time we should move on.
Yeah. And I'm hoping that we might find out a little bit later on how you've resolved some of those expectations.
Oh yeah,
yeah. You've got all those in hand, right?
Yeah, we've still got the 4 children.
Yeah.
Okay. So last week, in particular to you, Phil, you spoke about that in meaningful relationships, we should endeavour to communicate our expectations. So obviously one of your examples just then, it took you a year before you got to that point of communicating, but you got there. That's the main thing. So how willing are you both to communicate those expectations to each other? And do you do it well? And has this changed over the years?
Yeah, I think I'll take this one first. Yeah, I'm definitely less likely to deal with it straight away. Like Phil, like he said in the example, he's very much like I deal with it now. I tend to wait. I want to say just think on it, but it's not. It's let resentment kind of fester. And I think as well, I'm not particularly clear. And like Phil said,
you will come around to then communicate it.
Yeah, eventually, but it takes me longer, I think. And I think, like Phil said in his message last week, that many, he didn't say women, but I would say women in particular, think that, you know, our husband should know. Well, if he knows us and if he loves me, then he should know. And actually, that isn't true. It is our responsibility as a wife to let them know what's going on and what our expectations are. And I mean, a good example of this, I know Phil's used this in a few messages before, is I used to leave like books open for Phil around the house. Like if there was a particular chapter of something that I thought he should be doing as a husband, I'd like leave it in the toilet with a bookmark highlighted, and like leave it on the bedside table open. Oh, I left that book there. Would you mind passing me that book? So I would be very much like that.
How did it go? How did that go?
Like
did it work?
passive aggressive.
Yeah.
Drippy.
Yeah. drip. Yeah. A bit of a nag. Yeah. I'm working on that.
But it was funny because you were. I remember that really clearly. She left it and said, "Oh, we're reading this, but it was a great chapter." That was the start. It was like a seed sown, and I'm a stupid man, and so I was like, "Cool." And then the next week it was like, "You should really read this chapter," and then I was like, "No, I'm all right." And then the third week, "Can you read that chapter of that book?" And I stopped you, didn't I? I remember and saying, "What do you want me to get from that chapter? Just tell me, because I won't get it." Tell me what you want me to get from that chapter and be clear with me, because that's how I tick. I like directness. And I suppose for me then, like, am I willing to communicate? Oh, yeah. And probably too quickly, perhaps, sometimes. I'm very direct, and I don't mind being clear about my expectations. But especially, I remember when we started working together, when we took the church on, you know, I was incredibly clear with my expectations, and when they weren't met, very direct about them. I remember so often Steph would just be crying in the office,
once a week.
Yeah, and I can understand. I'm like, this is what we agreed on. This is what you said, and you haven't done it, and you haven't met them, and so I'm very willing to, but I haven't done, and I don't do it well. So that's the difference about actually communicating it, but doing it well, doing it in a way that can be received from the other person, is something that I have to work on and have worked on for a long time. And because I'm a bit of a Vulcan, you know, it can come across as offensive or attacking someone when it's just me being honest. But I need to understand that I need to communicate in a way that is better for the other person, whether that's a friendship or in a marriage. Otherwise, it just does more harm than good. It divides further. And so, yeah, I'm learning to be more gentle, I think.
So part of that is like not only learning about each other, but actually the way you tick yourself as well.
Yeah, and that book was actually Gary Chapman's Love Languages book. So that's something that we've definitely worked on and talked about a lot.
Yeah, that is a really good book.
It is a good
book, by
book.
the way.
It's a great book.
Yeah, we definitely recommend it. Okay. So last week, Phil, you said in marriage we should endeavour to prioritise the other person's expectation over ours. So what do you find to be the main barriers to regularly doing that for the other person, or in Steph in this particular case?
Yeah, I think right now for us, no, shush, my turn. Right now, I think it's just the busyness of life. Like, you know, with lockdown happening, homeschool, you know, we've got 4 children, one of them that doesn't sleep through the night.
Always
and
tired.
So we're, I think, constantly exhausted. And I think the result of that would be you resort to selfishness, I think. And I mean that, well, I do mean it in a negative way, but as in, you know, I think naturally as humans, we are selfish, aren't we? And so, yeah, when those things get in the way, especially, I think, exhaustion, I think that's a massive one, being tired, you tend to go, right, what is it I need, as opposed to what does the other person expect or require?
You resort to default setting, I think, and default programming, which is selfishness, but also default programming, like we said, about learning the other person's love language or the other way, the other person's needs or whatever. And I think it's the same, like, we naturally behave and love the other person in the way that we want to be loved, and that's our natural default, and we have to choose to do it from another perspective. And the same, I think, with expectations, is when we're tired or we become selfish or focusing on self, is we default to even our own expectations. So we'll behave in a way that we think that we expect rather than what the other person expects. And so it's defaulting to our natural programming that's been built up either through genetics or through over time through parenting and our life experience. And so, and I suppose the other main barrier is when we get a feeling that the other person is putting in less effort to meet our expectation, is when we can easily, it creates resistance and and resentment, and therefore maybe easier to then not do it yourself. I think that's probably the main barriers, for us at least.
I feel like there should be more there. Like, that feels like you've just dealt with that and handled that really well.
Cool. Next question then. Smashed it.
Does that mean we get a point?
Get a brownie point for getting it right. And it's not sponsored by Gary Chapman, by the way.
No,
But the book is really good if you don't know, yourself and your defaults and want to learn more about that.
Definitely.
So, okay. So you'll be happy to know I've got one question for you, and then I might throw in a random one.
All right.
If you're up for it. So thinking about your expectations of each other, I'm just making sure. Oh, I've missed a question.
Have you? Number 4, I think we're on.
Well, yeah, I could tell by Phil's face. See, that's communication, that is, when just by a slight widening of the eyebrows, I'm like, not on the last question.
Don't ask me anything personal.
So, anyway, to the right question. Last week, it says you discussed the idea of mutual submission, where both parties would seek to put the other needs, desires, and dreams above their own. So my question to you is, what is the way forward when you feel that you are doing your part to meet your spouse's expectation, but the other person doesn't seem to be trying?
Don't know, never happened. Next question.
Well, I've got a word for this. And the word would be grace, I think. Yeah. The Bible says in the New Testament about God gives us an abundant provision of grace. And I think for me...
You need it.
I know I need it, yeah.
Oh, I thought you meant for me.
No.
It.
Well, you do. But for me, I'm like, I know I need that abundance of that provision that God gives me. And so for me as a wife...
You offer it to me as well.
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
Aww.
Yeah, that's what I think that's what we should do. And know that, we all go through different seasons, different times in life, when some are good, some are bad. And so, there have been periods in our life where, Phil's had to give me grace and vice versa. And I think as well, the other part of that is knowing that, nobody's perfect. There are no perfect people. That's why we need Jesus. And so, even though I believe we're perfect for each other, I actually know that, we have imperfections. And so we both need not just God's grace, but each other's grace in those difficult seasons. Yeah.
And there's, we've had some difficult seasons as a couple from when we got together all the way through to just recently, where I know that in this area, we've had to carry each other, not just like emotionally or whatever, but carry each other in the fact that we know that our expectations aren't going to be met, and we're having to concentrate on the other person to build them up or get them back to a place. And I think when we feel like they're not meeting our expectations and we feel it, and it becomes front and center in our mind and maybe in our feelings, is actually to not give up and choose. I would say, and I think I've tried to do this more and more as we've been married longer, is to choose to actually, when I feel like that, is to actually double down and actually do even more and meet their needs even more than I would have done before, rather than what is natural is to back off our own efforts, is to double down and put in more efforts. And I think I've read from the scripture in Corinthians last week about that love doesn't demand its own way. And if you really love someone and you're trying to love them as God calls us to love, that we don't demand our own way. And so when they're like that and they're not able to meet our expectations, is actually give more support and more love into that. And I think only when you're struggling to then do that and you've done all you can do and you'll come into it where the point is a struggle for you is to then re-communicate expectations for yourself that you need and require. But do it in a good way, as opposed to just doing it, seasoned with salt, doing it at a good time, and in a way that can be received in a right tone from the other person, I think.
That's really good. Sorry, I'm just like,
good, I'm mad.
Just taking all that in. And I suppose you were saying quite naturally that maybe you don't default to that. So is it something that you do become aware of when you're in those situations and circumstances where you're like, this is different this time, like you say, needing to double down? It's a conscious.
Yeah, for me, it's an intellectual reaction rather than an emotional one. So it's almost like I think I've now come to the point where it's like a learnt behaviour. When I feel like I don't want to, that's when I choose to double down and choose to go further and beyond. I don't do it all the time. We let each other down all the time, but I've chosen, like, when I feel like this is the academic choice I'm going to make that will actually fix the problem and help it, rather than actually do more damage or cause further division.
Is that similar for you, Steph, as well?
Yeah, and I think over the years, from getting to know one another more, and like Phil said, how he at the beginning would have been very direct, and so I was saying something even the other day when he said something to me, and I was like, I just spoke my mind and was like, that there would have in years gone by given me a reason to be offended, and I would have got upset. And actually, it's changing the way you're thinking and going, I know the way he's saying that is because he loves me, or I know, like Phil said, he's under that pressure, or he's got this stress, and so I need to go, okay, cool, I'll take that, and not be offended. Because I think, again, I mean, I don't know, probably not you because you don't get offended, but particularly as a woman, you kind of go, oh well, he meant that, and this means all these other things, and actually that doesn't. What he said was very clear, very direct, and it wasn't that he doesn't love me or he thinks I'm stupid or that I'm not doing a good enough job, or anything like that. And so I think just having those clear and direct and understanding each other. But again, that comes from time. It's not going to happen overnight, is it?
It's definitely choosing to not be emotionally driven and being driven by what we want and our thought processes, and being led by spirit instead of being led by flesh. I think that's what it comes down to ultimately.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you. Okay. Well, really, really is the last question this time. I tried to trick you before. So I want to ask you, how have your expectations of each other and your relationship changed as you've moved through marriage?
We were talking about this the other day after I spoke about it, after I prepped some stuff. And I think our expectations have changed over time, naturally, as individuals. But I think it's natural for people to think that we should lower expectations of each other as we go through a marriage. Like we end up compromising our expectations of each other and what we think we're trying to build together. And so... because we're fighting for our own, and we end up throwing some away, and we prioritize some hierarchically to say this is most important to me, so I fight for this the most, and so then we lose the lower ones and have lower and lower expectations of each other personally. Where I think as you get to know each other and put up with people's faults, I think people think that's the key to longevity in a marriage. Where I think to have a great relationship and to be great people within the relationship, you actually make the expectation higher over time, and I think that's what we've done. I think we have done that over time, is that we expect more from each other, and just like iron sharpens iron, we hold each other to account. And I was going to say slap each other upside face, but not physically, but we talk to each other when the other one isn't behaving in a way that we think is good or healthy, not just in our relationship, but in life generally, even with other people. And so I think, she holds me, I said this to her, that I think she holds me to a higher account than I hold myself. So I'm a better version of me because I have Steph instructing me. No, just, holding me to high expectations of who I am. And so... And I joke.
I want you to be the best you can be, and I want Phil to think that about me. I want him to make,
Yeah, and I said to Steph that I think, men, although it might sound sexist, that without a good wife just end up turning into a pig, and that's not all men. It's just, I think, just me. I think I need a good wife to make me a better version of me, and I think that's just the truth. And so I think our expectations of each other have gone up over time, and we speak the truth in love, hopefully, so that we might grow. And I think with regard to personal expectations, I think they've gone up.
Yeah, and I think in terms of hopes and dreams, like, they've kind of morphed into each other's. So, like, you know, Phil's with the children, you know, like I said at the beginning, you know, I didn't want children. And actually, I think actually that's probably more important to me than it is to you now, you know, and the same with even holidays. You know, for me, holidays were really important, that we had that rest, and, you know, particularly Disney, you know, and actually that's your dream now, isn't it? I think when last time we went to Disney World, you know, it was the best holiday you've ever had. So. Yeah,
and I enjoy that sort of thing now, and even planning it and stuff. And we were talking about this last night, actually, that just it's not that it's my dream, and it's not. It's just that because it's hers, and I've valued it over the years. It's become my dream.
Yeah.
But it's important to me because it's important to her.
Yeah.
And that's the distinction. And I think psychologically our brain, because it's, I don't know, maybe it's just my dumb brain, but it values things that we focus on. And so if we choose to focus on something, our brain tells us this must be valuable and important to us.
Yeah.
And so I think it's the same in marriage. When you put the effort in, your brain tells you, you know, you put the effort into the other person's expectations, and your brain tells you that it's important, and it compounds it over time. And when you push to meet your partner's expectations, you might just find over time that they become yours. And so I think that's what's happened.
Yeah, that's good.
That is good. It's really good. I've enjoyed this. I hope you guys at home have enjoyed this as well. And just before you say something else, I think we should just stop it there, because that was, you know, a good little nugget of wisdom to finish on. So we're going to do this again next week. I hope you're excited.
Yeah.
I'm excited. Cool. See you next week. Well, thanks for joining us today, and thanks to Phil and Steph for opening up their lives to us. If you enjoyed this week, then you will want to check in next week, as we'll be doing another interview with Phil and Steph. But this time, we'll be looking about great expectations in church. See you then.